Listen and subscribe to the GrowthCraft Startup Community Podcast on all the major podcast players, including iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere where podcasts are available. And leave a 5-star review if you like it. We need those reviews to grow the show, and it's the easiest way to help us grow the show that you can do right now. So head on over to iTunes, head on over to Google Podcasts or Spotify, and leave a 5-star review for the GrowthCraft Startup Community Podcast. And tell all of your friends who are entrepreneurs to take a listen. And thanks. Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells. This is Tom Libby.
Welcome back, everybody.
And you are listening to the GrowthCraft Podcast. The GrowthCraft podcast is designed with the startup founder in mind. This podcast is committed to growing your connections to our GrowthCraft advisors, increasing your engagement overall with the GrowthCraft community, and of course, growing your knowledge about all the benefits GrowthCraft can provide for your startup and for your project. And we can't wait to bring you along with us on our journey today. Now, typically here on the podcast, we interview startup founders, advisors, and others about their journey, their process, their project, and of course, we ask them how they came to be connected with GrowthCraft. And today, we are going to be talking with one of those folks in that others category. And so I'd like to welcome to the podcast today, Richard Messing. How you doing, Richard?
Doing great. Thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I feel very much welcome because I know you guys, and I really appreciate what you're doing, and so I feel like we're on the journey together, and I'm just delighted. To be here.
Awesome. Well, we're delighted to have you. And so I'm going to start you off with our typical first question that we ask every guest here on the GrowthCraft podcast. For our listeners, what is it that you do exactly?
Great question. So what the World Ethics Organization does is we're doing two things. Number one, our primary mission is to give voice to ethics, If I ask you, when was the last time you had a conversation with someone where the word ethics was part of the conversation, the probability is probably very low. You don't hear people talking about ethics frequently. It's very infrequent. And so, but if I ask you, does the world need to become more ethical? Everybody says, what, are you kidding me? Look at what's going on in the world. The world definitely needs to become more ethical in a major way. And if I ask you on a scale from 1 to 10, how important is ethics to you? If 10 is very important and 1 is unimportant, almost everyone says, well, it's no less than a 9, and for me, it's a 10. And so so there's no question about it that ethics is extremely important to people. But it's a profound mystery that our public schools don't teach it, and the universities and colleges don't require one ethics course for mainstream undergraduates. So there's a major disconnect. And so what the World Ethics Organization is committed to doing is to give voice to ethics in our everyday narratives, in our everyday conversations, in the home, at work, and in the public square. That's number one. And we're doing that in various ways. Number two is we're building an ecosystem for ethics, an ecosystem composed of companies, organizations, communities, individual global citizens who not only believe that it's very important that the world become more ethical, but actually are going to make commitments to bring ethics into their sphere of influence in a specific way. And so that's what we're doing.
So Rich, let me play the dummy here, and I'll ask the question because nobody else I think has the intestinal fortitude to ask it, and I'm just that naive, which is Like, so define this for us, because I think one of the reasons that people may not be talking about ethics often enough is because maybe they don't get it. Maybe they don't understand. Like, so because we get words thrown around at us all the time, like ethics and morals and integrity and all these things that we just assume that people don't understand in what reference point we're using them in, right? So can you just talk a little bit about the definition of it from your perspective, and why you're thinking everyone thinks it's a 9 and should be a 10, but they're really not talking about it? Because that just blows my mind that everybody answers 9 or 10, but yet it's not involved in any conversation. It just seems a little silly. Not silly in a bad way, but hopefully you know what I mean. It just sounds silly that it's that important, but
Very important question, and I want you to know that many people don't know what the word ethics actually means. Many people, when I bring up the subject or I tell them what I'm doing, they say to me, "What do you mean by ethics?"
Yeah.
I went into a Barnes and Noble store several months ago. I walked up to the employee and I said, "Where can I find books on ethics?" She looked at me. She said, "Ethics? Well, what do you mean?" This is Barnes and Noble. Okay, so this is very common. And it's not surprising because it's not taught. So ethics essentially has to do with the way we treat each other. Literally, the way we treat each other and the impact we have on each other. If you go into Haagen-Dazs and you're trying to decide whether to get vanilla or chocolate ice cream, ethics is not an issue. Ethics does not apply, because you're not having an impact on another person. You're really not having an impact on you either. What do you get, vanilla or chocolate? This doesn't make any difference. And so ethics isn't relevant. It only becomes relevant when the decision you're making has the potential of either causing harm or bestowing some good on another person or the world. That's when ethics becomes relevant. And so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about ethics. That's what I mean.
Now, when I walk,
yeah, go ahead.
no, when I walk into Haagen-Dazs or Baskin Robbins with all their 57 or 56 flavors, I always get the blueberry cheesecake ice cream, which is unethical to my interior. It doesn't like any of that. But I get what you're saying about ice cream and vanilla and chocolate. However, I think that somebody listening may say, okay, that's fine. I get it that ethics doesn't apply in a series of minor decisions, right? But where does ethics apply in major decisions? Like, here's an example. Is it ethical for me to, I'll make this very simple or relatively simple. Is it ethical for me to marry this person or not? Where does ethics apply there? Or about business, right? Is it ethical for me to go into partnership with this person or not? How does the World Ethics Organization tackle those kinds of problems? And what are the challenges that are inherent in asking and answering those types of questions?
Okay, so first let's just realize that whether people realize it or not, everyone has a code of ethics. We inherit a code of ethics through the culture, from our parents, through the people that take care of us when we grow up, through the media, from the street. So everyone has some notions of what's right versus wrong. Okay, and that can vary between people. That can vary. So regarding the question of is it ethical to marry this particular person? Well, if you're a religious Jew, we're supposed to marry a Jewish person. And so the code of ethics that a religious Jewish person has would say, no, it would be unethical to marry someone who isn't Jewish. Okay, so that's one approach. But that could be completely different for another person, right? If someone's a secular person, isn't religious at all. I was secular for the first 35 years of my life. Religion meant nothing to me. Didn't make any difference to me whether I was going to marry a Jewish person or someone who's not Jewish. That didn't matter. It wasn't unethical for given my code of ethics. So that's marriage. Now the So what was the second example? What was the second example?
Sure. The second example is it ethical for me to go into a partnership with this individual? How do I make that determination? Where do I put that? Where do I put the answer to that question?
Well, um, it depends on your code of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people, if you work for the mafia, they have their own code of ethics. And so they would not think it unethical to go into business with another criminal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So my code of ethics is, or your code of ethics is not to enter into business transactions with criminals. And so, as you can see, codes of ethics vary. Okay, so but it really boils down to whether what decision you're making, given your code of ethics, is going to produce harm or deliver some form of goodness to another person. Now, there are universal codes of ethics. There's no question about that. That across the board, that across different cultures, research has shown that there are universal codes of ethics that apply across the board. For example, the concept of kindness. It's ethical to be kind to another human being, and it's unethical to murder somebody for no reason. And so there are universal code of ethics, and so since we have to figure out how to live with each other, and the ultimate objective for the World Ethics Organization is to maximize human flourishing. Human flourishing is the terminology that's now being used in academia and also in the enterprise for what makes for the optimal culture, the optimal state of being in an organization, in a group of people. Human flourishing. If you have a lot of human flourishing, then everyone's going to be enjoying the state that they're in, and that's like what human beings ultimately want. That's the term, that human flourishing. And so the question is, how do you achieve human flourishing? Well, the World Ethics Organization asserts that ethics is the way to achieve that. And so that's part of our mission, is to teach people the ethics that you need to adopt in order to maximize human flourishing, what not to do to avoid causing harm, and to create an environment where people are talking about this. That's what's missing. Ethics has been around for a little less than 4,000 years. And as we know, even though it's a subject matter in academia, the human condition continues to be chronically unethical at every level. We see it happening in our own personal lives. We see it happening in our communities. We see it happening, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. International affairs. It's across the board. So this is so education is insufficient. We know this from history. Something else is missing, and that's what the World Ethics Organization mission is, to provide what's missing. And we claim that what's missing is an ongoing conversation about ethics, and actually having ethics explicitly be part of the everyday narratives that we have at work, at home, and in the public square. Explicitly mean people use the word ethics, talk about ethical principles, ask the question, what's the most ethical decision we could make given the circumstances that we're facing? If we're asking that question, we're good to go.
Join us online via Zoom at the GrowthCraft Startup Community Founders Forum each third Tuesday of the month at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Look, advisors and founders, we're all in this together. Building relationships with your peers in entrepreneurship is just as important as connecting with experts and advisors. Each month, every third Thursday, we'll meet online via Zoom to share ideas, get support, support each other, and talk about universal issues that nearly all startups share. We'll celebrate our victories, chat about challenges, and then break out into small groups to address a timely topic of interest. It's a great way to meet like-minded entrepreneurs. Check out the links to the Third Tuesday events on the GrowthCraft website and join us at the GrowthCraft Startup Community Founders Forum in the show notes below the podcast player you're listening to right now.
But wouldn't that, not that I'm confused, but I guess I want to ask this a different way, because so part of what you're talking about and people having their own code of ethics, and so what I might think of as right or wrong may vary from what Hassan thinks is right or wrong based on our circumstances, upbringing, so on and so forth, right? So are you trying, I'm trying to understand, like, and again, in asking the question that you just did, is if the decision we're making right now, is this going to, produce an ethical outcome? That could be, if you have 20 people in a boardroom and they're trying to make that decision for a company, like a big company, you might have 10 people think one way and 10 people think another, right? So are you trying to say that you're trying to, I'm sorry, I know I'm just a long version of this question. And I know that there are universal, ethical statures, right? Like they're like, to your point, with kindness and stuff like that. I get that too. But are you trying, with the World Ethics Organization, are you trying to unify some of these thought processes of ethics across the board, like make more universal ethics versus allowing them to be based on bias or upbringing, or are you trying to pull that out of the everybody has their own code of ethics and trying to make a one universal form of code of ethics for everybody? Like I'm trying to understand how the world ethics board is approaching this from
an example. I'll give you an example. One universal ethical principle is to respect other people for their differences. So other people are going to have different concepts of what's ethical and what's not ethical. Now, even though their code of ethics is different than yours, they have to respect you for yours, and you have to respect them for theirs. If you don't have respect, then you're not going to be able to have a relationship with the person. Now, so you see that respect transcends, is an ethical principle that transcends all other all codes of ethics. You see that? That would be a universal code. That would be a universal ethical code. Respect.
Sure, but I don't know.
So that's just a one small example of a code that's universal. Now, this is a living thing. This is not something that's static. Ethics is dynamic, not static. So in order for people to improve their code of ethics, you need to be able to talk about your code of ethics with other people and vice versa, and present arguments for or against, what the best decision to make given the circumstances. This is historically the way it works. Now, the reason I say this is because my ethnic background is Judaism, and I know from what happened with the Jewish people is that the code of ethics that Jewish people live by was determined through vast discussions and debates among the rabbis and the sages over the course of hundreds of years. And that doesn't end. There's commentaries upon commentaries upon commentaries about these codes of ethics. So it changes, or the application of these different ethical ideas or codes are applied differently from generation to generation. So this is a living thing. It's not static, it's dynamic. And so the World Ethics Organization, we're going to present an initial code of ethics to get started, but then we're going to create a forum in which anyone could participate in the conversation about how to improve that code of ethics. So it's going to be dynamic, not static. That's just the nature of it. That's the nature of it. The reason why it works, it has to work this way, is because, well, now I'm going to get a little bit into the underlying principles. It's inevitable that human beings possess false beliefs about the world and about the human condition itself. This is inevitable. You know, I don't want to get into why it's inevitable, but let me just put it that way, because I offer a course where I teach the nitty gritty of all of this, called the Change Agent. But it's inevitable that we all have false beliefs about the human condition. Therefore, we can't rely on ourselves entirely to make the best decisions at all times, because all of our decisions are coded as true inside of us. If it wasn't the case, we wouldn't believe those things in the first place. So all of our beliefs are coded as true. It's inevitable that many of them are false, and we don't know how many of them are false. And therefore, we have to have an external source of wisdom to help us make best decisions at all times. That source of wisdom we can call a code of ethics. Logic dictates this.
Okay,
there's no way out of it. There's no way out of it.
So you mentioned logic, right? And full disclosure here, I've taken the Change Agent course with Richard, and I've been through that process. It's a great course, by the way, particularly if you are an entrepreneur who is listening to this podcast. If you're a startup founder, if you're an advisor who's never really thought deeply about these types of topics before, Richard does a great job of taking you through the sort of foundational ideas that lay underneath ethics at a very root level. And honestly, to Tom's question, some of those kinds of questions are answered in the Change Agent course, and we actually go really deep. We do a deep dive into the core of where the answers for those questions become manifest. And Richard was talking about how there's a lot of history in Judaism and commentary and talk around this. I would also assert that there's a lot of talk in Christianity, which then split over into the secular world, into philosophy at post-Enlightenment. And now we're sort of at the, well, depending upon your perspective, we might be at the end of the Enlightenment era, just depends. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. This is not that kind of podcast. But the last sort of 500 years of Western thought that has not been religiously primarily motivated has been about what is ethical and what is not. And Richard's course does a great job in sort of bringing and coalescing all of that together in a really understandable way for someone who may never have taken a philosophy class, or, as we opened up with this podcast, may never have thought about it that deeply, So that's just a little pitch for Richard's course as a person who actually went through it. But I want to ask you a question about the course in relation to that. Why is a course the best way to sort of begin to have these conversations? Because Tom was raised with a particular ethic. I was raised with a particular ethic. You were raised with a particular ethic, right? We're all three different people with three different experiences, three different codes of ethics, potentially. And yes, we can get to some sort of conclusion if we're all in a business together about what the common overlaps are in our code of ethics, and agree to sort of make those some principles, which are different than ethics. Ethics underlay principles. But where it gets to be tricky is when my code of ethics and your code of ethics doesn't match up, right? And so how is an educational course going to help the average startup founder close that gap, maybe with a co-founder that they're bringing in? How is that going to help them have those types of conversations? And why is that the best tool? Why is education the best tool for that?
Well, I think ultimately, my vision is that ultimately people will be able to explain these things to each other, so that they don't have to take a course, right? But I don't think we're there yet. So I meet people on Lunch Club and explain to them what I'm doing in such a way that they become sufficiently interested to sign up for the course. And so that tells me that there is a latent demand for ethics. people deep down know that there's something fundamentally missing in the world, something wrong, and it's almost obvious, and so it resonates when I talk to them about what it is that I've developed. It resonates with them, and I'm able to talk to people in such a way that they become interested in it. And so I've tapped into this essential. It's like a yearning of some kind. Um, I don't think necessarily. I don't know what other modality would work, frankly. And so I decided not to charge for it because I think that it's so important that people have an opportunity to learn these things. And that's one of the reasons why I've offered to make it available to the members of GrowthCraft. And it's not something easy to explain. That's the other thing about this. The essential principle that enabled me to do this is when I had an insight that the human condition is fundamentally paradoxical. Paradox causes confusion biologically. I mean, that's what paradox does. And so for that reason, it's inherently confusing. So it's not an easy thing to learn, and then to learn how to teach. And so I think that's part of the issue. Like, Tom said before, it's used the word confusion before. I'm not surprised he used that word because in my view, I think most people are confused. But they're not consciously confused. They don't realize they're confused, but they are confused, and that's it's natural. It's natural. When you have false beliefs, you're confused.
Let me just say for the record that I might be more confused now, Richard. So I'm just kidding. No, but from a standpoint of like, so again, I think the word. I think that if we look at the word ethics and how we're approaching it and how we're thinking about it, see, and again, to your point, right? I made some assumptions that the ethics that were all universal. Like, you're either a good person or you're not. Being a good person it's not my. I shouldn't be the one to judge that, right? Like whether or not Richard is a good person or not, right? So I think that there are certain fundamental things that people do or don't do or say or don't say or interact, the way they interact with people, that makes them a good person or not. I didn't think that was based on my own version of ethics. I thought that was more universal. And to your point, Richard, maybe it isn't, or to your point, it isn't. I shouldn't say maybe. But if that's the case, then how do we truly and honestly really know what's right and wrong? Like, how do I know? And again, basing it on, like, I'm going to make this decision and it's going to be for the greater good, or it's going to have this kind of impact on people, seems pretty universal to me, right? Like, I'm trying to understand how I get to.
Why do you need ethics? Why do you need ethics? I'm a good person.
No, why we need them. No, hold on, time out. I'm not suggesting why. I'm not saying we don't need them, or I'm not trying to understand why we need them. Believe me, I'm on your side with that part of it. Where I'm getting at is, I'm looking across the table at somebody that makes a decision that I look at and go, that's terrible. You're a bad person. But yet he's looking at it going, I just made this decision based on X, Y, and Z. I'm a good person. Like, that's where I'm losing. Like, that's where the disconnect for me is. I think it's more universal than it really is, according to what you're saying. So how do I take, and again, I go back to, it's not about respect. For me, it's not about respect, because I can respect your opinion. I can respect your actions as being your actions based on your own foundation. But that level of respect does not make me decide whether you are a good or a bad person based on your ethics. Right? Like, my version of this could be completely different than other people. So that's why I was kind of excited to talk to you about this, because I just think it should be universal, right? And maybe I'm wrong, and I probably am wrong, because as Hassan will tell you, I'm not right all the time by a long shot. But like, there are just certain things that just should be universal. You're a good person or a bad person, and the world should be able to judge that based on your actions or your decision-making processes. So now with everybody being able to say, this, he sounds gonna laugh, I kind of laugh at this, because like this whole this movement of I'm my own person, I can do what I want to do, and I'm happy about myself. Like there's this whole movement about being more selfish, and I don't like this movement, by the way. I really think that that's part of the problem with the way that the ethics are going, the selfishness that people are starting to think about, like it's all about me, I'm all about me, I'm going to worry about me. And the reality of it is, if you forget that you're supposed to be taking care of the people behind you and laying a foundation for the people in front of you, then the world's gone to crap anyway, right? Like, I'm trying to understand why it's okay for everybody to have their own code of ethics, and it shouldn't be more universal.
Well, I personally agree with you.
Okay.
I personally agree that there are universal ethics, and that everyone should learn them. I agree with that, and unfortunately, the way the culture has gone, the way the world has gone up to this point in time since the Enlightenment, it's become moral relativism. It's become relative.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the major problems with Western civilization, is that it's in major trouble. Western civilization is on the decline, and many people think it's for this very reason. So I do agree with you as far as that's concerned. But the problem is that it's inevitable that people have false beliefs about the human condition itself, what we're talking about. Like, people have false beliefs about this, and that causes people to see the world inaccurately and interact with the world in a way that's inconsistent with the way the world really is, specifically when you're interacting with other human beings. And so it's inherently paradoxical for this reason, and that's why it's confusing. And so you can be consciously confused and know that you're confused, or you can be unconsciously confused, which I assert is the general state of affairs in the world that we live in today.
I'm pretty consciously confused.
It has nothing to do with IQ. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with intelligence. You can be a good person and be very confused and think you're being ethical when in fact you're not. That's very possible. The big scam, like the guy the Enron guy, the guy who ran Enron. I'm sure that guy was a good person. Look at what happened in the Holocaust. The people, the army captains, the commandos, all that. Like, a lot of those guys, they would run the concentration camps, kill people just randomly. Then they go home to their family and treat their children with kindness and love, and they'd be a good husband. Human beings can act like this. They can be like this. And so, I personally think that there are very few people that have decided to be bad, relatively speaking. Most people want to be good, are good, but just because you want to be good and you're well-meaning doesn't mean you're not doing things that are unethical. I can give you many examples of this.
Join the GrowthCraft startup community online via Zoom each first Tuesday of the month at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Expert Tuesdays. With Expert Tuesdays, you'll hear from one of our top-notch expert advisors and thought leaders in an informative workshop or presentation focusing on a topic important to emerging and growing companies. From sales and marketing to storytelling and leadership, in this hour-long monthly session, you will be able to connect with the GrowthCraft community, advisors, founders, and others. And you'll learn entrepreneurship skills you can apply to your startup project right now. Check out the links to the GrowthCraft website to join us on Expert Tuesdays in the show notes below the podcast player you're listening to right now. And thanks. Well, before you do, and I also agree that there is I don't call it a paradox. I use a much different kind of word than that. I won't get into the word that I use, but we'll go with the word paradox for the time being. There is a paradox inherent in human behavior where the our conscious or subconscious intentions and motives are hidden from us, right? Because we don't know. The many psychologists know this, Carl Jung being the most famous of them, but we don't know what we don't know about our own selves. We see through a glass, as another theologian said many years ago, we see through a glass darkly, right? We can't understand ourselves. And so the path to, and I would start in a leadership context, and even in a business context, I would frame it like this: the path to self-awareness starts with looking obviously at yourself, but not, to Tom's point, and even to your point, Richard, not in a selfish way, not in a I can be anything I want to be kind of way, which is that's why Tom was laughing, because that's sort of where I get off the train with everybody else as well. But it's more of holding a mirror up to yourself and forcing yourself to look at your own paradoxes and to resolve those. And psychology forces us to do that, depending upon which psychological school you're in, or if you've taken a psychology class. The best parts of religious theology force you to do that. But then also, so does the study of ethics. And so, one last question on this, and then I want to turn the corner. I want to talk a little bit about GrowthCraft with you. But one last question on this. So, and I'm going to frame my what if in terms of a business person, a startup founder, right? So let's say I'm a startup founder. I want to take the change agent course. The conversation that we've been having for the last 15, 20 minutes or so sounds really interesting. I want to go sign up for this. But I know that I may have cut corners in the past, or maybe didn't quite land on the target in a way that made me feel comfortable, right? Is this course going to challenge me to go back and fix those kinds of things? Is it going to challenge me to go back and repair those types of relationships? Or, to Tom's point, is it a course that is going to set a path for me so I don't make those mistakes in the future? How is this course going to help me best if I'm a startup founder who maybe thinks I'm a good person, or thinks that overall I make good decisions, but I have a shadow of a doubt on around 5 to 10% of them?
Well, both. What the course, first of all, the course will make it very clear to you the human weaknesses and pitfalls that most people are not aware that they've fallen into. And when you understand those pitfalls, and then you can see the damage that you've done in the past, you'll see the importance of repairing that damage. And so and everything that you've done in the past, unless you can't find the person anymore because you just had no way of contacting the person that you've had this unfortunate interaction with, everything is repairable. And so at least people should try to repair whatever damage they've done. That's a basic ethical principle. And when you do that, it actually empowers you. But in terms of looking forward, you will definitely learn a set of principles that will enable you to observe yourself and everyone else more accurately. That alone will enable you to avoid making similar mistakes in the future, number one. And it will enable you to serve everyone else that enters your sphere of influence in a new way. So you actually acquire a new degree of freedom that you did not know was possible before. A free will and freedom is part of the course. And that's one of the transformational aspects of the course, is acquiring this new degree of freedom, because you've learned something about the paradoxical nature of the human condition that you did not know before. And that could be turned into a competitive advantage, because if your competitors don't understand this, you have a competitive advantage over them. Just from the perspective of how you interact with customers and clients, and how to empower your clients and how to empower the people you work with inside your company and outside of your company. This is the one of the great benefits of taking the course. So does that answer the question?
Mm-hmm.
So Richard, let's turn the corner here, and we do have to wrap up
Sure.
within a few minutes here. So I want to ask you a little bit more about GrowthCraft. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to GrowthCraft, how you got involved, why you're staying involved, because you've been with us for quite a while now, and what you enjoy about being part of the group. Can you talk a little bit about that before we let you go?
Sure. So I learned about GrowthCraft when I met JP Puchulu. I met JP. He was introduced to me by someone who already was involved in the Cotel business community, which is the predecessor to the World Ethics Organization. And JP, he took the Change Agent course, and through JP, I learned about GrowthCraft. I was actually one of the first. I think I was in the first cohort when GrowthCraft started, and so I think that what I like about GrowthCraft is the fundamental commitment to serving the startup community in a very unique way. And so I think I just think it's just a wonderful model, the model that you have, which is a model that I've never seen before, where your advisors work together as a team to support your members, and of course the people that I've met, you guys in particular, I have a tremendous amount of respect for both of you, and for your commitment to just to serving the people who join your community. And so you're not in it just to make money, and you're in it to make money meaningful. Yeah. And so that to me is highly ethical. So you're a highly ethical organization. I don't know the extent to which you talk about ethics, and so I would I look forward to spending more time with you to see if we can increase that.
Well, I would assert that actually in a conversation we were having yesterday in our leadership meeting, we were talking about ethics without really using the word ethics, actually.
I think that's part of the problem. I don't think people use the word enough, but we talk about the right thing to do, the bigger picture. Like, we talk about that a lot, but I don't think we ever preface it by saying we're going to talk about ethics now.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I think we do. I think we do talk a lot about it a lot internally.
Yeah.
But maybe we should be using the word ethics more. Well,
it's not just using the word, it's giving actually a voice to ethics, so that people understand that when you're talking this way, that's what you're doing.
And it's purposeful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Richard, where are all the places where people can find the world information about the World Ethics Forum if they want to become more involved with that, or find information about the Change Agent course? Where can they go and where can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can go to the worldethicsorganization.org website. That's our website, and you can also go to the Cotel Business Community website as well. That's at actually cotelbusiness.org, and there you'll learn all about the programs that we offer, one of which is the Change Agent. You can contact me at richard@cotelgroup.com or at richard@worldethicsorganization.org. Or you could just contact these guys. Hassan knows how to get in touch with me. Tom knows how to get in touch with me. And so it's one big family. And so I look forward to meeting anyone who's listening to this podcast today. We don't charge a fee for the change agent course yet. People are pressuring me to start charging for it.
Take it while you can get it.
Take it while you can get it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we are looking for founding donors for the World Ethics Organization. It's only a $250 donation. I'm a founding donor of the World Ethics Organization. So thank you very much, Hasan and Tom, for inviting me to participate in your podcast. And let's rock and roll.
Let's rock and roll indeed. So we are going to have links to all of the different places where you can find Richard Messing, the Coattail Business Group, the World Ethics Forum, and of course, information about the Change Agent course in the links that will be in the show notes below the episode of this podcast. I would encourage you to click on all of those to find out how you could be more ethical and to make ethics more of your practical and ethical business and competitive advantage. Once again, I'd like to thank Richard for joining us today on the GrowthCraft podcast. And with that, Tom and I,
we're out.
We're out. Each second Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, join GrowthCraft live and in person at Second Thursdays at CIC, located at 1 Broadway, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Located at Kendall Square, CIC features the most engaging entrepreneurial community in the Northeast, right next to MIT and minutes from Harvard University and downtown Boston. With 250,000 square feet of professionally managed flexible workspace, CIC has every office amenity you could possibly need to scale your startup project. For those of you who are local, or if you're just visiting Boston, GrowthCraft advisors and founders can meet others in our community face-to-face. Join us for an informal social and informational get-together. Meet others, chat with advisors and peers, make connections, and then stay for Venture Cafe, starting at 4:30 p.m. Eastern every second Thursday at CIC. Check out the links to the GrowthCraft website to join us live and in person at Second Thursdays at CIC in the show notes below the podcast player you're listening to right now. And thanks.